Hi, I'm Joel Papadix and welcome to my studio. In this video, we're going to paint a view in Lake Tahoe that overlooks the snow-capped Sierra Mountains and features redwood, pines, and huge rocks. We'll work in layers, starting with the background, and use a dry brush technique to paint the snow-capped mountains. We are going to specifically focus on how to paint evergreen trees in watercolor. Before you try this video, go to my website at watercolorpop.com and on the Paint Along with Pop page, download my notes and reference photo. You'll find the links in the description box below. I suggest you watch it all the way through and then re-watch it as you paint, pausing as needed. I always like to start with a little inspiration from artists that I admire. One of my favorite Ogden Pleisner watercolors is New Arrival's Valdez, Alaska. I love the shapes he made in the snow-capped mountains. Ever since I saw this painting, I've always wanted to do something similar. The California Impressionist, Edgar Payne, masterfully used light grays in the distant mountains, and he contrasted that with the very colorful elements in the foreground in his oil painting Big Pine Lake Sierra. With these images in mind, let's begin. I always start by wetting the entire sheet of paper. Although the white clouds don't look like there's any color in them, there is, and I mix a little cadmium orange and scarlet for the clouds' warm parts and some cobalt blue for the cooler areas. I mix some Payne's gray, which is cobalt blue and ivory black. I wait until the shine on the paper just starts to disappear. At this point, the paper is at the moist stage of wetness, and it's a good time to put in the cloud's dark, soft edges. I organize my cloud patterns so that they lead the viewer's eyes down into the composition. I make these forms larger and on oblique at the top of the sky and more level and lighter in value towards the horizon. Finally, I take some Winsor Blue green shade and paint a few openings where the clear blue sky is beginning to peek through. Remember, we're painting an overcast day effect, so don't overdo the openings. When the paper is completely dry, it's time to mass in the snow-capped Sierra Nevada mountains. I'm using Payne's gray again, but this time with more blue than black. Whenever we hold the brush perpendicular to the page, we achieve a solid wash. But when we hold the brush parallel and lightly drag it across the top fibers of the paper, we get a broken edge effect. That's how we're going to do the snow areas. You kind of move the brush on its side and hope for the best. I hold the brush more upright for those parts of the mountain where there is no snow and it's a solid area of blue. Earlier, I drew in a very straight pencil line using a right triangle where the mountains meet the lake, and I paint in that edge as carefully as I can. I'm intentionally leaving gaps here and there where the snow meets the sky. That's called a lost edge. I rely on the viewer to fill in the gaps using their imagination. Lost edges give our work some added mystery, and it's a good thing to do. The dry brush technique is not an easy thing to do, and you may have to practice until you get the hang of it. But be patient. It's really worth learning how to do in watercolor. Notice how I painted right over the areas where there's going to be evergreen trees. The evergreens are way darker than the mountains, so it's not necessary to carefully work around them. Because it's an overcast day, the lake will appear more gray in color than blue. I mix Payne's gray again using French ultramarine blue, ivory black, and a tiny touch of orange. I don't wait for the bottom of the mountain to dry before I put in the lake. I fuse in the area together using a wet and wet technique for another lost edge. Again, I paint right over all the evergreen trees. I completely dry the paper for the next step. I mix a green using a simple combination of cadmium lemon yellow and French ultramarine blue for my trees. I add a tiny touch of alizarin crimson to slightly gray it out. Pine needles tend to grow in groups of 3 to 5 clusters off a branch, whereas spruce needles grow in a single file. I put in a branch or two, and then I fill in the clusters using a script liner brush. I like to switch back and forth between a flat brush and a script liner to mass in all the needles. When painting an evergreen tree, consider these points. Is the tree densely filled in, or are there large gaps in between the branches? In this case, the tree is filled in more solidly towards the bottom. Be careful not to make too many openings, otherwise your picture is going to look too broken up and busy. The next point to consider is, what shape is the tree? Evergreens fall into 4 distinct shapes. An upside down cone with a flat bottom, an upside down ice cream cone with a rounded bottom, column shape, tall and narrow like the column on a Greek temple, or is the tree has no distinct shape but spreads out in all directions? Next, how do the branches grow? Do they grow diagonally from the main trunk or more horizontally? Or is it a combination of both? More diagonal at the top, horizontal in the middle, and as they get weightier along the bottom, do they grow downward diagonally? I like to use the corner of a 1/2 inch flat to paint most of my trees. Notice that I hold the brush way towards the end. I find in holding it that way, I'm able to make a more unpredictable, natural shape to my trees. I like to work from the center of the tree outwards. I try hard not to paint identical looking branches. I want each branch to look slightly different than the next. In this tree, we're looking at the bottom part of it, so its branches are growing more diagonally downwards. It's fairly dense, so don't overdo the sky holes. You know, I'm often asked, what is harder to do, oils or watercolor? I've always felt that it depends on what you're doing. I remember how hard it was to paint a tree in oils. It seemed the white paint from the sky would get into your green branches, and how frustrating that was. But here in watercolor, it's so easy to do. As I paint the ends of my branches, I'm lifting the brush upwards so that the branches appear to taper thinner. And here at the top of the tree, the branches are growing out more diagonally upwards. Finally, I mix a very dark green, adding more French ultramarine blue into the local color. On an overcast day, the lightest value tends to be in the top plane of the branch. The next darkest value is the upright or side plane. And the underplane parts of the tree are usually the darkest. I like to squint at the subject in order to see the shadows more simply. I paint in those shapes, and I put an occasional soft edge with a brush full of clean water on the top parts of the shadow for the occasional halftone. Here the shadows are going on all the underside parts of the branches. Finally, I take a script liner brush and mix up some French ultramarine blue and cadmium red deep and put a few dark sticks in here and there. I hope you enjoyed this demo. To find out more about me and my art, visit my website at watercolorpop.com. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to see new videos as they are released. You'll find a link below. If you enjoyed this video and like to leave me a tip, I'd greatly appreciate that. On the Paint Along Pop with Pop page on my website, click on the Commerce button that says Tip Joel. No worries if you can't. Keep watercoloring and stay well. Till next time, bye-bye.